It was a typical Tuesday afternoon when Detective Rodriguez decided to set up a speed trap on Maple Street. He had been having a rough month with his ticket quota, and his supervisor had made it clear that numbers needed to improve. The detective parked his patrol car behind a large oak tree, positioning himself perfectly to catch drivers who might push the yellow light at the busy intersection ahead. Rodriguez had been on the force for 8 years, and he knew all the tricks of the trade. This particular spot was a gold mine because the traffic light had an unusually short yellow phase, catching many drivers off guard. He had written dozens of tickets here over the years, and most people just paid the fine rather than fight it. In court. At exactly 3:47 p.m., he spotted a silver Honda Civic approaching the intersection. The light had just turned yellow, and Rodriguez watched as the car slowed down and came to a complete stop just as the light turned red. But Rodriguez saw an opportunity. He knew that if he claimed the driver ran the red light, it would be her. Word against his, and judges almost always sided with police officers. Agent Lisa Park had just finished her grocery shopping at the local supermarket. After 15 years with the FBI, she had developed a habit of staying alert even during routine activities. She noticed the patrol car parked behind the tree as she approached the intersection, so she made sure to drive extra carefully. When the light turned yellow, she checked her mirrors and determined she had enough time to stop safely, which she did. Lisa was currently working on a major organized crime investigation that had taken her team 2 years to develop. The case involved several high-ranking officials, and maintaining her cover was crucial. She dressed like any other suburban mom, drove a modest car, and kept her FBI credentials hidden unless absolutely necessary for work purposes. As she sat at the red light, checking her phone for any urgent messages from her team, Lisa noticed the patrol car pulling out from behind the tree. Her heart sank a little, knowing she had done nothing wrong, but understanding that some officers might still find reasons to make stops. Rodriguez activated his lights and pulled in behind the Honda. As he approached the driver's window, he was already mentally preparing his story. The driver appeared to be an ordinary woman in her 40s, probably a working mom who would be too busy to fight a ticket in court. Perfect target, he thought to himself. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Rodriguez said in his most authoritative voice. "Do you know why I pulled you over today?" Lisa rolled down her window completely and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. "Good afternoon, officer. I'm not sure why you stopped me. I believe I followed all traffic laws." "Well, I observed you running that red light back there," Rodriguez lied smoothly. "That's a serious moving violation that puts other drivers at risk." Lisa felt her blood pressure rise slightly, but her FBI training kicked in. She had interviewed hundreds of suspects and witnesses over the years, and she could spot deception from a mile away. The officer's body language, tone, and eye contact patterns all screamed dishonesty. "Officer, I respectfully disagree," Lisa said calmly. "I stopped completely when the light turned yellow, and I remained stopped until it turned green again." Perhaps there was a misunderstanding. Rodriguez didn't like being challenged. In his experience, most people accepted whatever he told them, especially women who seemed intimidated by his uniform and authority. This driver's calm confidence annoyed him. "Ma'am, I've been doing this job for 8 years, and I know what I saw," he said, his voice becoming more aggressive. "You clearly ran that red light. I'm going to need to see your license, registration, and insurance." Lisa reached for her purse slowly and deliberately, narrating her actions to avoid any misunderstandings. "I'm reaching for my wallet now to get my driver's license." She handed over her documents, all of which were in perfect order. As Rodriguez examined her license, he noticed she lived in an upscale neighborhood. This might mean she had the resources to fight a ticket, but it also meant a larger fine would hurt more. He decided to escalate the charges to ensure she would just pay rather than risk higher penalties in court. Miss Park, I'm also noticing that you seemed agitated during our conversation. Rodriguez continued his fabrication. Were you perhaps distracted or under the influence of anything today? Lisa's FBI training helped her recognize this as a classic intimidation tactic. Officers would sometimes suggest impairment to justify more serious charges, even without any evidence. She remained perfectly calm. "Officer, I haven't consumed any alcohol or drugs, and I'm perfectly alert," she replied. "I was simply grocery shopping and heading home. Could you please show me your badge number so I can reference it if needed?" This request made Rodriguez uncomfortable. Citizens who asked for badge numbers usually meant trouble. They were the type who might file complaints or request dash cam footage. He had learned to avoid such complications. "My badge number is clearly visible," he said dismissively, even though it really wasn't from Lisa's angle. "Let me ask you this. Do you have any weapons in the vehicle?" "No weapons, officer," Lisa answered truthfully. Her service weapon was locked in a safe at home, as required when off duty. Rodriguez walked back to his patrol car, pretending to run her license while actually deciding how to handle the situation. His dash camera had a convenient habit of malfunctioning during stops like this, a technical glitch that his department's IT guy had helped him arrange months ago. After making Lisa wait for 15 minutes in what seemed like a power play, Rodriguez returned to her window with a ticket book in hand. "Miss Park, I'm citing you for reckless driving, failure to obey traffic signals, and disorderly conduct," he announced. Lisa was shocked by the escalation. "Officer, I haven't engaged in any disorderly conduct. I've been completely respectful throughout this entire interaction." "Ma'am, questioning my authority and demanding badge numbers constitutes disorderly conduct in my book," Rodriguez replied. "You also failed to comply with my instructions when you argued about the red light." Lisa realized she was dealing with a corrupt officer who was willing to fabricate charges. Her FBI experience had taught her that some law enforcement officers abused their power, but experiencing it personally was infuriating. "I'd like to request that we review your dash camera footage of this stop," Lisa said politely. Rodriguez had been dreading this moment. "Unfortunately, my camera system experienced a technical malfunction today. The footage isn't available." Of course it did, Lisa thought to herself. She had seen this pattern in numerous civil rights cases the FBI had investigated. Cameras mysteriously malfunctioned whenever officers needed to cover up misconduct. "Officer, I have to respectfully disagree with all of these charges," Lisa said. "I plan to contest this in court." "That's your right, ma'am," Rodriguez said with a smug smile. "But I should warn you that fighting these charges could result in even more serious penalties if you lose. Judges don't like it when citizens waste the court's time." As Rodriguez handed her the ticket, Lisa noticed his hand was slightly shaking. Despite his confident exterior, he seemed nervous about something. She filed away this observation, along with every other detail of their interaction. "Have a good day, ma'am," Rodriguez said as he walked back to his patrol car. "Drive more carefully in the future." Lisa sat in her car for a moment after the officer left, processing what had just happened. In her 15 years with the FBI, she had investigated police corruption, organized crime, and public corruption. She knew exactly what she had just experienced, and she also knew that Rodriguez had made a huge mistake. As she drove home, Lisa began mentally preparing for what would come next. She had no intention of letting this slide, not just for herself, but for all the other innocent citizens who might have fallen victim to this officer's lies. Rodriguez had picked the wrong person to mess with, and he was about to learn that lesson the hard way. 6 weeks had passed since the traffic stop, and Agent Park had spent every spare moment preparing for her court date. She had requested all available documentation, studied traffic laws, and even visited the intersection multiple times to gather photographic evidence. Her FBI training had taught her that preparation was everything. And she wasn't about to let a corrupt officer get away with his lies. The morning of the court hearing arrived with typical autumn weather. Park dressed in a simple navy blue suit. Nothing too fancy that might draw attention to her profession. She carried a modest briefcase containing her evidence, looking like any other citizen fighting a traffic ticket. Her colleagues at the FBI had no idea she was dealing with this personal matter, as she preferred to keep her work and private life separate. Detective Rodriguez woke up that same morning, feeling confident about the day ahead. He had testified in dozens of similar cases over the years, and the routine had become second nature to him. Judges trusted police officers, prosecutors relied on their testimony, and most citizens either didn't show up to court or accepted plea bargains rather than fight the charges. Rodriguez spent extra time that morning polishing his dress uniform and practicing his testimony in the mirror. He had refined his story over the past 6 weeks, adding details that would make him sound more credible. In his mind, this was just another easy win that would look good in his performance review. The municipal courthouse was buzzing with activity as both Park and Rodriguez arrived for the 9 a.m. docket. The building was old but well-maintained, with marble floors that echoed every footstep. Park noticed Rodriguez immediately as he strutted through the metal detectors, his chest puffed out with self-importance. Rodriguez spotted Park sitting quietly in the back row of the courtroom gallery. She looked exactly as he remembered, a middle-aged woman who seemed nervous about being in court. Perfect, he thought to himself. She probably spent the last 6 weeks worrying about this case and would be easy to intimidate during the proceedings. The prosecutor assigned to the case was Jennifer Walsh, a young attorney who had been with the district attorney's office for only 2 years. She was eager to maintain her conviction rate and rarely questioned police testimony. When Rodriguez approached her before court began, she greeted him warmly. "Detective Rodriguez, good to see you again," Walsh said, shaking his hand. "I've reviewed your report on this case. Sounds like we have another reckless driver who thinks she can get away with endangering public safety." "That's exactly right," Rodriguez replied, embellishing his story even further. "This woman was completely out of control. She ran that red light at dangerous speeds, and then became hostile when I tried to explain the seriousness of her actions. I've seen drivers like her cause serious accidents." Walsh nodded sympathetically. "Don't worry, Detective. With your testimony and your years of experience, this should be a straightforward conviction. I understand the defendant doesn't even have private counsel, just a public defender." Park's court-appointed attorney was David Chen, a overworked public defender who was handling 37 cases that week alone. He had barely 15 minutes to review Park's file before court began, and he seemed exhausted from his crushing caseload. "Miss Park, I'm David Chen, your appointed counsel," he said, sitting down next to her in the gallery. "I've looked over the charges against you, and I have to be honest, fighting a police officer's testimony is always difficult. The prosecutor is offering a plea deal that would reduce the charges significantly." Park listened patiently as Chun explained the plea. Bargain. She could pay a smaller fine, accept probation, and avoid the risk of more serious penalties if she lost at trial. For most people, this would seem like the smart choice. "Mr. Chun, I appreciate your advice, but I'm innocent of these charges," Park said firmly. "I need you to understand that this officer is lying about what happened. I have evidence that proves my innocence." Chun looked skeptical. "Ms. Park, I understand you believe that, but judges almost always side with police officers in these situations. Detective Rodriguez has an excellent service record and has testified in hundreds of cases. Are you sure you want to risk a trial?" "I'm absolutely sure," Park replied. "I know this is difficult to prove, but that officer committed perjury in his report, and I intend to demonstrate that in court." Meanwhile, Rodriguez was busy coaching Walsh on the key points of his testimony. He explained how dangerous Park's driving had been, how she had endangered other motorists, and how her hostile attitude had made the situation worse. "The thing is," Rodriguez said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "I think she might have been under the influence of something. She seemed disoriented and argumentative, but I couldn't prove it at the scene. You know how it is with these suburban types. They think they can pop a few pills and drive around like nothing happened." Walsh took careful notes, impressed by Rodriguez's attention to detail. "Did you conduct any field sobriety tests?" "I would have, but she became so agitated that I was concerned for my safety," Rodriguez lied smoothly. "Sometimes you have to make judgment calls in the field about when to push certain procedures." Park watched this conversation from across the courtroom, her FBI training helping her read their body language and lip movements. She could see Rodriguez gesturing dramatically as he spoke to the prosecutor, and she knew he was probably adding even more lies to his original story. When court finally began, Judge Martinez called the docket, and Park's case was third on the list. She watched the first two cases carefully, noting how the judge handled evidence and witness testimony. Both previous defendants had accepted plea bargains rather than go to trial. "The People versus Lisa Park," the bailiff announced. "Charges of reckless driving, failure to obey traffic signals, and disorderly conduct." As Park and her attorney approached the defendant's table, she noticed Rodriguez straightening his uniform and checking his notes one final time. The prosecutor looked confident, shuffling through her papers with the casual air of someone who expected an easy victory. Judge Martinez was a veteran of the municipal court system who had presided over thousands of traffic cases. He was known for being fair but efficient, rarely tolerating lengthy arguments over minor violations. However, he also had a reputation for taking police testimony very seriously. "Ms. Walsh, are the people ready to proceed?" Judge Martinez asked. "Yes, Your Honor, the people are ready," Walsh replied confidently. "Mr. Chun, is the defense ready?" Chun glanced nervously at Park, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense is ready to proceed." "Very well, Ms. Walsh, please call your first witness." The people called Detective Rodriguez to the stand. Rodriguez stood up slowly, making sure everyone in the courtroom could see his decorated uniform and the various commendations pinned to his chest. He walked to the witness stand with the confident stride of someone who had done this many times before. As the bailiff administered the oath, Park watched Rodriguez raise his right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The irony wasn't lost on her. This man was about to commit multiple felonies by lying under oath in a court of law. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" the bailiff asked. "I do," Rodriguez replied firmly, looking directly at the judge with what he hoped appeared to be sincere conviction. Park felt her pulse quicken slightly, not from nervousness, but from anticipation. She had spent 15 years listening to criminals lie under oath, and she could spot the telltale signs from across the room. Rodriguez was about to make the biggest mistake of his career, and he had no idea that he was lying to someone who made a living catching liars. The stage was set for what would become one of the most dramatic court proceedings the municipal courthouse had seen in years. Rodriguez thought he was facing just another ordinary citizen, but he was actually about to go head-to-head with one of the FBI's most experienced investigators. Detective Rodriguez settled into the witness chair with practiced ease, adjusting his uniform one final time before facing the courtroom. He had given this type of testimony so many times that it felt like reading from a script. The familiar routine of questions and answers, the respectful nods from the judge, and the inevitable guilty verdict that would follow. Today would be no different, or so he thought. Prosecutor Walsh approached the witness stand with her notes in hand, ready to guide Rodriguez through his testimony. She had complete confidence in his account of events, never questioning whether a police officer might fabricate evidence. In her 2 years as a prosecutor, She had learned to rely heavily on law enforcement testimony to secure convictions. "Detective Rodriguez, please state your name and occupation for the record," Walsh began. "Detective Miguel Rodriguez, badge number 2847, Metro City Police Department. I've been with the department for 8 years and currently work patrol in the downtown district." Park watched Rodriguez's body language carefully as he spoke. His posture was overly rigid, his hands clasped too tightly, and his voice carried a slight tremor that most people wouldn't notice. These were classic signs of someone preparing to lie under oath, something she had observed countless times in FBI interrogation rooms. "Detective Rodriguez, were you on duty on the afternoon of September 15th of this year?" Walsh continued. "Yes. I was working the day shift, conducting traffic enforcement on Maple Street near the elementary school," Rodriguez replied, adding the detail about the school to make himself sound more sympathetic to the judge. "Can you tell the court what you observed that day regarding the defendant?" Rodriguez took a deep breath and launched into his fabricated story. "At approximately 3:47 p.m., I was positioned near the intersection of Maple and Oak Streets when I observed the silver Honda Civic approaching at what appeared to be excessive speed. The traffic light was red, but the vehicle continued through the intersection without stopping." Park felt her jaw clench as she listened to the blatant lies. Every word Rodriguez spoke was the opposite of what had actually happened. She forced herself to remain calm, knowing that her turn would come soon enough. "What happened after you observed this violation?" Walsh asked. "I immediately activated my emergency lights and pursued the vehicle. The driver seemed to realize she had been caught and pulled over about a block away from the intersection." Rodriguez was getting into his rhythm now, his confidence growing with each lie. "Describe your interaction with the defendant when you approached her vehicle." This was where Rodriguez really began to embellish his story. "When I approached the driver's window, the defendant immediately became argumentative and hostile. She was agitated, speaking loudly and questioning my authority to stop her. Her behavior raised several red flags for me." Judge Martinez looked up from his notes, slightly surprised by this characterization. Most traffic defendants he encountered were nervous but respectful during police encounters. "Can you be more specific about the defendant's behavior?" Walsh prompted. "Certainly. When I explained that I had observed her running the red light, she became very defensive and started making wild claims about stopping at the intersection. She was waving her hands around and raising her voice. At one point, she demanded to see my badge number in an aggressive manner that made me concerned for my safety." Park's public defender, Chun, glanced over at her with surprise. The calm, professional woman sitting next to him seemed incapable of the behavior Rodriguez was describing. But Chun had learned not to question police testimony too aggressively. As it rarely went well for his clients, Rodriguez continued weaving his web of lies. The defendant also made several suspicious movements during our interaction, reaching into her purse without being asked and acting in a way that suggested possible impairment. When I asked if she had consumed any alcohol or drugs, she became even more agitated. "Did you conduct any field sobriety tests?" Walsh asked. "I would have preferred to, but the defendant's increasingly hostile behavior made me concerned about escalating the situation further. She was already causing a scene, and I felt it was better to issue the citations and end the encounter safely." Park noticed that Rodriguez was sweating slightly now, despite the cool temperature in the courtroom. His lies were becoming more elaborate, and keeping track of all the false details was clearly stressing him out. "Detective Rodriguez, based on your 8 years of experience, how would you characterize the defendant's driving and behavior that day?" Rodriguez sat up straighter, preparing to deliver what he considered his closing argument. "In my professional opinion, the defendant displayed extremely reckless behavior that put other motorists and pedestrians at serious risk. Her complete disregard for traffic laws, combined with her hostile attitude when confronted, represents exactly the kind of dangerous driving we see too often in our community. Walsh nodded approvingly. Did you document this incident in your official report? Yes, I filed a complete incident report immediately after the stop, detailing all of the defendant's violations and her uncooperative behavior. I also noted that my dashboard camera experienced a technical malfunction that day, which unfortunately prevented me from recording the interaction. Park almost laughed out loud at this convenient excuse. The malfunctioning camera was probably Rodriguez's most frequently used lie, allowing him to avoid providing video evidence that would contradict his testimony. Detective, in your professional opinion, do you believe the defendant poses a continued threat to public safety if these charges are dismissed? Chun finally stood up to object. Your Honor, that question calls for speculation beyond the witness's expertise. Judge Martinez considered the objection for a moment. I'll allow it. The witness may answer based on his professional experience. Rodriguez seized the opportunity to pile on more condemnation. Based on her reckless driving, her refusal to accept responsibility, and her hostile attitude toward law enforcement, I believe the defendant would likely continue to endanger other drivers if she doesn't face consequences for her actions. Thank you, Detective Rodriguez. No further questions, Your Honor. As Walsh returned to her table, she felt confident that Rodriguez's testimony had sealed the case. His detailed account, delivered with authority and conviction, painted a clear picture of a reckless driver who deserved punishment. Judge Martinez looked toward the defense table. Mr. Chun, do you wish to cross-examine this witness? Chun stood up slowly, knowing he was about to face an uphill battle. Cross-examining police officers was always difficult, especially when they were as confident and well-prepared as Rodriguez appeared to be. Detective Rodriguez, you testified that my client was driving at excessive speed. Do you recall what speed you estimated she was traveling? Rodriguez had to think quickly, since he had never actually measured Park's speed. I would estimate she was traveling at least 10 to 15 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Did you use radar or any other device to measure her speed? No. This was a visual estimation based on my training and experience. Chun pressed on, though his heart wasn't really in it. You also testified that your dashboard camera malfunctioned. How often does this happen with your equipment? Rodriguez felt a bead of sweat roll down his back. Occasionally we have technical issues with our equipment. It's unfortunate, but these things happen. Detective, you stated that my client was hostile and argumentative. Did she use any profanity or make any threats toward you? This was where Rodriguez decided to really embellish his story. She didn't use direct profanity, but her tone was very disrespectful and intimidating. She kept demanding information and questioning my procedures in a way that felt threatening. Park watched Rodriguez dig himself deeper into his hole of lies. Every false statement he made under oath was a federal crime, and she was documenting each one in her mind. Her FBI training had taught her to remain patient during investigations, waiting for suspects to hang themselves with their own words. No further questions, Your Honor, Chun said, sitting down with resignation. Detective Rodriguez, you may step down, Judge Martinez announced as Rodriguez walked back to his seat. He felt completely satisfied with his performance. He had delivered his testimony with confidence and authority, just like hundreds of times before. The defendant's public defender had barely challenged his account, and the judge seemed to accept every word he had said. Rodriguez had no idea that he had just committed multiple felonies in front of one of the most experienced federal investigators in the country. His lies were about to catch up with him in ways he never could have imagined. The courtroom fell into a brief silence as Detective Rodriguez returned to his seat, still glowing with confidence from what he believed was a flawless performance. Judge Martinez shuffled through his papers, preparing to move the case forward. Prosecutor Walsh smiled slightly, already mentally preparing her closing. Argument about the dangers of reckless driving and the importance of respecting law enforcement. Mr. Chun, is the defense ready to present its case? Judge Martinez asked. Public Defender Chun stood up, still looking overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence he thought he was facing. Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Lisa Park to the stand. Park rose from her seat calmly and walked toward the witness stand with measured steps. Her demeanor was completely different from the agitated, hostile woman that Rodriguez had just described. She moved with quiet confidence, her posture straight and professional. Rodriguez watched her approach the witness stand with mild interest. In his experience, most defendants became nervous and flustered when testifying, often making their situations worse by contradicting themselves or appearing unreliable. He expected this middle-aged woman to stumble through her testimony, probably contradicting herself and making his job even easier. The bailiff approached Park with the Bible for the swearing-in ceremony. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do, Park replied firmly, her voice carrying a strength that hadn't been evident during the pre-trial proceedings. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Chun began, following the standard format. This was the moment everything changed. Park looked directly at Judge Martinez, then at the prosecutor, and finally at Rodriguez before speaking. My name is Lisa Park, and I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have been with the FBI for 15 years, currently assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Martinez's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Prosecutor Walsh's confident smile disappeared instantly, replaced by a look of confusion and growing concern. Several spectators in the gallery began whispering to each other, but it was Rodriguez's reaction that was most dramatic. The color drained from his face so quickly that he looked like he might faint. His hand started trembling, and he gripped the edge of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The confident smirk he had worn throughout his testimony vanished completely. Order in the court, Judge Martinez said, though he himself seemed stunned by this revelation. Ms. Park, you're testifying that you are a federal agent? Yes, Your Honor. I can provide my credentials if needed, though I prefer not to compromise any ongoing investigations by displaying them publicly. Rodriguez's mind was racing. An FBI agent he had just spent 20 minutes lying under oath about. An FBI agent, someone who was trained to spot lies, gather evidence, and investigate crimes. Someone who probably knew exactly what he had done wrong, not just during the traffic stop, but in his testimony as well. Chun, who had been expecting to deliver a weak defense, suddenly realized he might actually have a chance to win this case. Agent Park, can you tell the court what happened on the afternoon of September 15th? Park's testimony was a masterclass in precision and professionalism. Unlike Rodriguez's emotional and embellished account, she spoke with the calm authority of someone who had testified in federal court dozens of times. I was returning home from grocery shopping at approximately 3:45 p.m. when I approached the intersection of Maple and Oak Streets. As I neared the intersection, the traffic light turned from green to yellow. I assessed my speed and distance, determined that I could stop safely, and came to a complete stop before the light turned red. What happened next? I remained stopped at the red light for approximately 30 seconds. During this time, I noticed a patrol car positioned behind a tree near the intersection. When the light turned green, I proceeded through the intersection at the posted speed limit. Rodriguez was sweating profusely now. Every word Park spoke was the exact opposite of what he had just testified to under oath. Worse, she was speaking with the calm precision of someone who actually knew what had happened, not someone making up a story. Agent Park, when did the police officer initiate the traffic stop? Approximately 2 blocks after I had legally proceeded through the green light. Detective Rodriguez activated his emergency lights and pulled me over. Can you describe your interaction with Detective Rodriguez? Park's FBI training allowed her to recall every detail of their encounter with perfect clarity. Detective Rodriguez approached my vehicle and immediately accused me of running a red light. When I politely disagreed and explained that I had stopped at the yellow light, he became increasingly aggressive and accusatory. Did you behave in the manner that Detective Rodriguez described in his testimony? No, I did not. I remained calm and respectful throughout our entire interaction. I kept my hands visible at all times, spoke in a normal tone of voice, and complied with all of his requests for documentation. Prosecutor Walsh was starting to realize that her case was falling apart. If Park was telling the truth, then Rodriguez had just committed perjury in front of the entire court. But Walsh still found it hard to believe that a decorated police officer would lie so blatantly under oath. Agent Park, you heard Detective Rodriguez testify that you were hostile and argumentative. How do you respond to that characterization? In my 15 years with the FBI, I have been trained to remain calm under pressure and to interact respectfully with all law enforcement personnel. I have never been accused of hostile behavior during any professional or personal encounter with police officers. Judge Martinez was beginning to see the picture more clearly. Agent Park, Detective Rodriguez testified that you made suspicious movements and appeared possibly impaired. What is your response to those allegations? Your Honor, I had not consumed any alcohol or drugs that day. I was completely sober and alert. As for suspicious movements, I narrated my actions when reaching for my wallet to avoid any misunderstandings. This is standard procedure that I follow during any police encounter. Rodriguez felt like he was watching his career crumble before his eyes. Every lie he had told was being systematically dismantled by someone who clearly knew exactly what had happened during their encounter. Agent Park, did you request to see Detective Rodriguez's badge number? Yes, I did. I politely asked for his badge number so that I could reference it if needed. This is a normal request that any citizen has the right to make during a police encounter. And did you request to review dash camera footage? Yes, I did. When Detective Rodriguez claimed that I had run a red light, I asked if we could review his dash camera footage to clarify what had actually happened. What was his response? He claimed that his camera had malfunctioned and that no footage was available. Judge Martinez leaned forward with interest. Agent Park, in your professional experience, how common are police dashboard camera malfunctions? Your Honor, modern police vehicles are equipped with reliable digital recording systems. While technical failures can occur, they are relatively uncommon. In my experience investigating police misconduct cases, claims of camera malfunctions often coincide with incidents where officers prefer not to have video evidence available. The implication was clear to everyone in the courtroom. Rodriguez's malfunctioning camera was almost certainly a lie designed to prevent video evidence from contradicting his false testimony. Agent Park, do you have any evidence to support your version of events? This was the moment Park had been waiting for. Yes, Your Honor. I have several forms of evidence that contradict Detective Rodriguez's testimony. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a tablet device. I have GPS tracking data from my phone that shows my exact location and speed throughout the entire encounter. This data proves that I was traveling at the posted speed limit and that I stopped at the intersection for 32 seconds. Rodriguez felt sick to his stomach. He had never considered that a defendant might have electronic evidence of their own. I also have timestamped photographs that I took at the intersection over the following weeks, showing the traffic light timing and sight lines. These photos demonstrate that Detective Rodriguez could not have observed me running a red light from his claimed position behind the tree. Furthermore, Park continued, I have dash camera footage from my own vehicle that shows the entire encounter, including my complete stop at the red light and Detective Rodriguez's approach to my vehicle 2 blocks later. The courtroom was completely silent now. Everyone realized they were witnessing something extraordinary, a police officer's perjured testimony being demolished piece by piece by an FBI agent who had the evidence to prove every word she spoke. Judge Martinez looked from Park to Rodriguez, then back to Park again. Agent Park, are you saying that Detective Rodriguez's testimony was false? Park looked directly at Rodriguez, who was now visibly shaking in his seat. Your Honor, based on my training and experience in investigating perjury cases, I believe that Detective Rodriguez has knowingly provided false testimony under oath regarding every major aspect of our encounter. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Rodriguez had just been accused of perjury by an FBI agent. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Martinez sat back in his chair, processing the bombshell revelation that had just exploded in his courtroom. In 30 years on the bench, he had never witnessed anything quite like this. A decorated police officer had apparently committed multiple felonies by lying under oath, and his victim turned out to be one of the most qualified people in the country to expose those lies. Detective Rodriguez looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. Sweat was pouring down his face, his hands were shaking uncontrollably, and his breathing had become shallow and rapid. The confident swagger he had displayed just minutes earlier had completely vanished, replaced by the unmistakable look of someone who knew he was caught. Prosecutor Walsh was frantically shuffling through her papers, trying to figure out how to salvage a case that had just imploded spectacularly. Her mind was racing with the implications of what she had just witnessed. If Agent Park was telling the truth, then Walsh had just helped a corrupt police officer commit perjury in her courtroom. Judge Martinez finally broke the silence. Agent Park, these are very serious allegations you're making against Detective Rodriguez. You're essentially accusing a sworn police officer of committing perjury in my courtroom. Yes, Your Honor, I am, Park replied with calm conviction. And I have the evidence to prove every aspect of my testimony. Very well. I'm going to need to see this evidence before proceeding further. Can you present your dash camera footage to the court? Park connected her tablet to the courtroom's display system with the help of the bailiff. Within moments, crystal clear video began playing on the large screen visible to everyone in the courtroom. The footage showed Park approaching the intersection, the light turning yellow, her car coming to a complete stop, and waiting for 32 seconds before the light turned green. Rodriguez closed his eyes, unable to watch the video that was destroying his career. Every person in the courtroom could see that Park had told the absolute truth about stopping at the intersection. The video continued, showing Park driving normally for 2 blocks before Rodriguez's patrol car appeared behind her with flashing lights. When Rodriguez approached her window, the audio clearly captured their entire conversation. Park's voice was calm and respectful throughout, completely contradicting Rodriguez's testimony about her being hostile and argumentative. Your Honor, Park said as the video concluded, this footage proves that Detective Rodriguez's testimony was false in every material aspect. I did not run a red light. I was not driving recklessly, and I was not hostile or argumentative during our encounter. Judge Martinez turned his attention to Rodriguez, who looked like he might be sick. Detective Rodriguez, do you have any explanation for the discrepancies between your testimony and this video evidence? Rodriguez's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. His lawyer training had never prepared him for being caught in such blatant lies by an FBI agent with video evidence. Detective, I'm waiting for your response, Judge Martinez said more firmly. Finally, Rodriguez managed to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Your Honor, I may have been mistaken about some of the details of the encounter. The understatement was so absurd that several people in the gallery actually laughed out loud. Park had just proven that every major element of Rodriguez's testimony was a complete fabrication. Not a simple mistake. Judge Martinez's expression hardened. Detective Rodriguez, this court takes the integrity of witness testimony very seriously. What I've just witnessed appears to be far more than a simple mistake. Prosecutor Walsh finally found her voice. Your Honor, the people would like to request a brief recess to review this new evidence. Motion denied, Judge Martinez replied. Sharply, we're going to resolve this matter right now. Agent Park, do you have any additional evidence you'd like to present? Yes, Your Honor. I have GPS data from my phone that corroborates the timing and location information shown in the video. Park displayed the GPS tracking on her tablet, showing her exact speed and location throughout the entire encounter. I also have photographic evidence showing that Detective Rodriguez could not have observed me from his claimed position behind the tree at the intersection. She showed several photos taken from different angles, proving that the tree completely blocked the view of the traffic light from where Rodriguez claimed to be positioned. Rodriguez was now slumped in his chair, looking completely defeated. The mountain of evidence against him was overwhelming, and he knew that everyone in the courtroom could see that he had been lying. Judge Martinez had seen enough. Based on the evidence presented, I am immediately dismissing all charges against Agent Park. Furthermore, I am ordering that this matter be referred to the appropriate authorities for investigation of potential perjury. Charges against Detective Rodriguez. The judge's gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo Rodriguez's falling career. Court is adjourned. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Rodriguez sat frozen in his chair, unable to move. His sergeant, who had been watching from the gallery, approached him with a grim expression. Rodriguez, you need to come with me. Internal Affairs is already on their way to the courthouse. Within 2 hours, news of the courtroom drama had spread throughout the police department and the local legal community. Rodriguez was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. His police union representative arrived at the courthouse, but even she seemed shocked by the extent of his misconduct. Agent Park gathered her materials calmly, as if exposing police corruption was just another day at the office. Public Defender Chun approached her with amazement. Agent Park, I have to say, in all my years as a defense attorney, I've never seen anything like what just happened in there, Chun said. How did you stay so calm knowing you had all that evidence? Park smiled slightly. Mr. Chun, in my line of work, I've learned that the truth always comes out eventually. It just takes patience and proper documentation. Meanwhile, FBI headquarters was already being briefed on the incident. Park's supervisor, Assistant Director Johnson, was not surprised to learn that one of his agents had uncovered police corruption, but he was impressed by how thoroughly she had documented everything. Lisa, I want you to know that this incident is going to trigger a much larger investigation, Johnson told her over the phone. We're going to be looking at Rodriguez's entire career, every arrest he's made, every ticket he's written, and every case he's testified in. The implications were staggering. If Rodriguez had been lying under oath for years, hundreds of convictions could be overturned. Innocent people might have been wrongly convicted based on his false testimony. Within 48 hours, the local newspaper picked up the story. The headline read, Police Officer Caught Lying Under Oath to FBI Agent. The article detailed how Rodriguez had unknowingly committed perjury against one of the most qualified people in the country to catch him in those lies. Rodriguez's police department launched a full internal investigation, reviewing every case he had worked on in his 8-year career. The district attorney's office began the process of notifying defense attorneys about potentially tainted cases. 3 months later, Rodriguez faced federal charges for perjury, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice. He eventually pleaded guilty to avoid a lengthy prison sentence, but his law enforcement career was over forever. The case became a landmark example of why police accountability matters and how important it is for officers to tell the truth under oath. It was taught in police academies as an example of how quickly a career can be destroyed by dishonesty. For Agent Park, the incident reinforced her belief that justice ultimately prevails when good people stand up for what's right. She had used her FBI training not to advance her career, but to protect the integrity of the justice system and ensure that one corrupt officer couldn't continue victimizing innocent citizens. The story spread throughout law enforcement circles as a reminder that police officers are not above the law and that somewhere out there might be an FBI agent ready to hold them accountable for their actions. Rodriguez learned the hard way that when you choose to lie under oath, you never know who might be listening. And sometimes, that person has the training, resources, and determination to make sure the truth comes out.